The air was thick with humidity and salt as the waves crashed onto the shore. It was December 26, 2004, and life went on as usual in the cozy seaside town of Tashai. People went about their daily routines, oblivious to the catastrophe that lurked just beyond the horizon. Among them was a young American woman named Sarah, who had come to Tashai for some rest and relaxation after a long and hectic year. She had booked herself into a small guest house near the beach where she spent her days sunbathing and reading, and her nights eating at local restaurants and chatting with other travelers. In the bustling market, Sarah had struck up an unlikely friendship with an old Sri Lankan man named Rowan. They had met by chance when Sarah had asked him for directions to a good seafood restaurant, and he had taken it upon himself to become her unofficial tour guide, leading her through the maze-like streets and alleys to the best spots in town. Along the way, they had shared stories about their lives, their families, and their dreams for the future. Meanwhile, on the other side of the island, in the village of Bang region, a group of Thai villagers were gathered for the annual Loikrath-on festival. They were making colorful floats out of banana leaves and decorating them with flowers, candles, and incense. The festival, which celebrated the arrival of winter and the new year, was a time for people to let go of their worries and make wishes for the future. Among the villagers was a young woman named Noy, who was helping her mother prepare a float for the festival. Noy had always loved this holiday, but this year she was especially excited because her boyfriend, Tan, had promised to meet her here and they would celebrate together. As the sun began to set, Sarah decided to head back to her guest house. She had enjoyed her day exploring the city with Rowan, and she was looking forward to a peaceful evening by the ocean. However, little did she know that this would be the last peaceful evening she would spend in the Chile for a long time. She arrived at her guest house just as the sky was turning a deep indigo color and the stars were beginning to appear. But something was different tonight. The usually gentle lapping of the waves against the shore was replaced by a strange hissing sound, and the once calm surface of the ocean was now choppy and turbulent. Sarah couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong. She had lived by the sea most of her life, and she had never seen the ocean behave like this. Just then, one of the other guests at the pension, a middle-aged German man named Klaus, came up behind her and put a hand on her shoulder. "Did you feel that?" he asked, his voice grave. "I felt something just now, like a tremor in the ground." Before Sarah could respond, the ground beneath their feet began to shake violently. The walls of the guest house creaked and groaned, and the terrified screams of other guests echoed in the night. "Earthquake," someone shouted, and the word hung in the air like a death sentence. In the midst of the chaos, Sarah found herself running for the hills with the other terrified onlookers. As she stumbled over the uneven terrain, she could feel the ground beneath her feet vibrating with such force that it seemed as if the earth itself was about to split open. Suddenly, she heard a deafening roar that seemed to come from the very depths of hell. And as she turned to look back, she saw a wall of water rising in the distance, growing larger and more menacing by the second. It was a tsunami. Sarah screamed, her voice lost in the cacophony of crashing waves and crumbling concrete. She tried to run, to get as far away from the destructive force of nature as possible. But it was too late. The tsunami was upon her, and all she could do was watch in horror as it crashed over her, dragging her under its merciless grip. When Sarah regained consciousness, she found herself lying on a beach, battered and bruised, but alive. The once picturesque coastal town was now a scene of unimaginable devastation. Buildings were reduced to rubble, trees were uprooted, and the ground was littered with debris. Struggling to her feet, Sarah looked out over the ocean, her heart heavy with the premonition of what she would find. And indeed, when she turned toward the shore, the sight that greeted her made her blood run cold. The beach was littered with bodies, some of them still clutching life buoys, others simply washed up on the sand, their faces pale and lifeless. Among the victims, Sarah saw the body of an elderly Sri Lankan man, his face twisted in a silent scream. It was Rowan. Overcome with grief and despair, Sarah collapsed to her knees, her mind reeling from the suddenness of it all. Just hours ago, Rowan had been full of life, guiding her through the bustling markets and sharing stories of his homeland. And now he lay before her, a lifeless form on the sand, his eyes staring blankly at the sky. The realization that this was only the beginning of her ordeal washed over. The devastation around her was so immense that it was hard to fathom. Entire families had been wiped out, their homes turned to rubble, their possessions scattered to the winds. And as the full extent of the tragedy began to sink in, Sarah knew that she was not only grieving the loss of an innocent stranger, but of a piece of her own humanity. Meanwhile, on the other side of the island, Noi was desperately searching for her boyfriend, Tan. She had seen the tsunami coming and had run to higher ground, but he had been working at his father's boat repair shop and hadn't been able to get away in time. When the wave receded, she ran back to the village to find him, but he was nowhere to be seen. Noi's heart sank as she realized the terrible truth. The tsunami had taken him from her, and there was nothing she could do to bring him back. She collapsed to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably as she realized that the vibrant, loving man she had fallen in love with was gone forever. His absence left a gaping hole in her chest, a wound that would never fully heal. The once joyful festival had turned into a nightmare, a cruel reminder of the destructive power of nature and the fragility of human life. As the days passed, Sarah and Noi began to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. They helped the survivors, shared their food and comforted those who had lost everything. But the trauma of the tsunami ran deep, and both women struggled to come to terms with the immense loss they had suffered. One evening, as the sky was turning a deep indigo color, Noi sat down on the beach, her eyes fixed on the waves. She couldn't shake off the feeling that something was missing, and as the darkness enveloped her, she knew that it was Tan. He was gone. She closed her eyes, trying to remember the last time she had seen him. The sound of his laughter echoing in her ears, the feel of his hand in hers, the warmth of his body against hers. A single tear rolled down her cheek as she whispered his name into the wind. Tan, oh Tan, where are you? As Noi's thoughts drifted back to that fateful day, she remembered the colorful floats they had made for the Loy Krathong festival, the ones that had symbolized hope and new beginnings. She had believed that her love for Tan would last forever, that they would grow old together and their happiness would only increase with time. But the tsunami had washed away her dreams, leaving her with nothing but memories. Sarah, too, found herself haunted by the ghost of the man she had befriended, Rowan. She thought back to their first meeting in the bustling market, how he had offered to help her, his kindness shining through his wrinkled face and twinkling eyes. She had appreciated his guidance, his patience, and his ability to make her laugh even when she had been at her wit's end. But now she mourned the loss of his gentle spirit, the wisdom he had embodied, and the comfort he had brought into her life. The bond they had formed had been unexpected, a chance encounter that had blossomed into a genuine friendship. But fate had been cruel, tearing them apart in the most tragic way imaginable. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the beach, Noah and Sarah sat side by side, united in their grief. They had never met before the tsunami, but they had been thrown together by their shared loss, their common humanity, and their desperate need for solace. They didn't speak, but their silence was comfortable, a shared understanding passing between them. They both knew what it was like to lose everything, to have their hopes and dreams washed away by the merciless waves. And in each other's company, they found a measure of comfort, a sense of solidarity that transcended words. Then, as if on cue, the ocean roared, sending a chill down their spines. They turned to look out at the water, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. For they knew that the ocean held both the beauty and the brutality, the tranquility and the terror, and they were at its mercy. And so they sat there, to lone figures silhouetted against the dying light, their backs to the fading sun, their faces turned towards the churning waves, their spirits bound together by a shared tragedy and an uncertain future. The year is 2004. For most people, it's just another day. But little did they know that this day would be etched in their memories forever. It was a day like any other, until the sea did something it had never done before and something it has never done again since. It all started at around 7 a.m., when the first rays of sunlight began to peek over the horizon. People were getting ready for the day ahead. Some were going about their morning routines, while others were heading out to work or school. The sky was a beautiful shade of blue, not a cloud in sight. The air was still, and the gentle breeze carried with it the scent of salt from the nearby ocean. It was a picturesque morning, one that seemed almost too perfect to be true. Off in the distance, fishermen were readying their boats for the day's catch. Among them was a man named John. He was an experienced fisherman who had spent his entire life at sea. He knew the ocean's moods as well as the back of his hand. But today, something was different. There was a strange stillness in the air, an eerie quiet that seemed to blanket the usually bustling harbor. Even the seagulls had fallen silent. As John cast his gaze toward the horizon, he noticed something that made the blood run cold. The sea, the vast expanse of water that had been a constant presence in his life for as long as he could remember, had mysteriously receded. At first, it was just a slight retreat, a subtle pullback from the shore. But with each passing moment, the water continued to recede, revealing more and more of the seabed. It was as if the ocean itself was taking a step back to reveal something hidden beneath its surface. A sense of foreboding washed over him, a feeling that something was terribly wrong, that the tranquility of the morning was just an illusion. Yet he couldn't comprehend why the sea was behaving in this unnatural manner. This was uncharted territory, something he had never witnessed in his years at sea. He wasn't the only one who noticed this strange phenomenon. People began to emerge from their homes, drawn by curiosity to the shore. They stood there mesmerized, watching as the sea continued its slow, steady retreat. It was a scene that seemed both fascinating and terrifying, like something straight out of a nightmare. Among them was a young mother named Sarah. She cradled her infant son close, his tiny fingers gripping her shirt as he gazed at the receding waters with innocent wonder. Sarah, however, couldn't shake off the feeling that this was not a scene to be taken lightly. Despite the unease gnawing at her, she found herself glued to the spot, unable to tear her eyes away from the spectacle before her. As the minutes ticked by, the water continued to recede, creating a vast, muddy expanse where the ocean had been just moments before. People began to venture into the exposed area, some cautiously, others with a sense of adventure. Children ran across the seabed, shrieking with delight as the wet, sticky mud squished between their toes. Fishermen walked further out, their eyes scanning the exposed seabed for any sign of marine life. For a while, the receding of the sea became a community event. a shared experience that brought the townspeople together in a mixture of fascination and apprehension. No one could recall such an event happening in their lifetimes. It was as if nature itself was putting on a show, albeit one that was both captivating and unsettling. As the crowd surged forward, oblivious to the impending danger, John stood rooted to the spot, his gaze fixed on the horizon. His experienced eye, honed by years at sea, had caught a glimpse of something in the distance, something that sent chills down his spine. In the far-off distance, he saw a dark, towering wall rising from the horizon. It was a wall of water, a tsunami, and it was heading straight for the town. He knew he had to do something, to warn the others, but the realization that they wouldn't listen, that they wouldn't comprehend the gravity of the situation until it was too late, filled him with a sense of helplessness. With a surge of adrenaline, he began to shout, his voice hoarse with urgency. "Tsunami! Look out! A tsunami is coming!" His words were lost in the cacophony of laughter and chatter. People paused to stare at him, their faces etched with confusion or amusement. Some even jeered, thinking he was trying to drum up business for the local aquarium. Desperation clawed at him as he realized the full weight of his warning. They couldn't see what he saw, the monstrous wave that was rapidly approaching. In a last-ditch effort, he waded into the water, hoping to get closer, to somehow convey the imminent danger. But the more he ventured in, the deeper the water grew, the relentless sucking sound of the receding tide growing louder with every step he took. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the water lurched forward, surging back into the harbor with a force that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. People screamed as they realized the danger that had been lurking just beyond their sight. The wave crashed over them, dragging them into the churning water, stealing their voices, their hopes, and their lives. John fought against the current, his heart pounding against his ribs, his lungs burning with the effort. He had to get back to shore, to safety. But the wave was strong, determined to drag him under. Just when he thought he might succumb to its relentless pull, he felt his foot catch on something solid. With a Herculean effort, he pulled himself up, gasping for breath as he stumbled onto the beach. He looked back to see the wave receding once more, revealing the debris left in its wake. Homes were destroyed, boats were tossed about like toys, and in the distance, he could see people struggling in the wreckage. Grief and despair washed over him, the full extent of the tragedy dawning on him. With a newfound determination, he began to run, racing towards the epicenter of the disaster, towards the horror that awaited him there. As he moved through the devastated landscape, he came across Sarah. She was kneeling beside her son, who was unconscious but still breathing. Relief flooded him. She was alive, but his relief was short-lived. In the chaos that followed, he watched in helpless agony as people were pulled away from the shore by the merciless waves. Some emerged from the water, their bodies battered and bruised, their eyes wide with terror. Others simply vanished beneath the surface, their cries for help swallowed by the roaring sea. The tsunami had struck with the force of a battering ram, shattering the peace of the coastal town. Homes were reduced to rubble, trees were uprooted, and the very foundations of the community were shaken. The once vibrant streets were now littered with debris, a haunting testament to the wave's destructive power. Amidst the devastation, a profound silence descended. The relentless roar of the sea had abruptly fallen silent, replaced by an eerie quiet that was more unnerving than the wave's fury. This somber quietude allowed the full weight of the destruction to sink in. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket that settled over the town, stifling any sound of joy or hope. The sun, which had heralded the start of this nightmare, now seemed to cast an accusing glare on the ruins below. Its light glistened off the shards of broken glass, the twisted metal, and the debris-filled waters, turning the scene into a macabre panorama of loss and despair. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long, eerie shadows across the devastated landscape, the survivors emerged from their hiding places. They were a somber, shaken lot, their faces etched with shock, their eyes reflecting the trauma they had just endured. Amidst the ruins, they began the grim task of surveying the damage, their voices hushed and their movements slow. Each shattered window, each collapsed wall was a fresh wound, a painful reminder of the wave's destructive touch. Their once familiar town now looked like a scene from a distant, tragic tale, a story that seemed too sorrowful to be real. As night fell, the chilling silence was broken by the sobs of the bereaved, the murmured condolences, and the low murmur of voices piecing together the fragments of what had happened. The starry sky, usually a source of comfort, offered no solace. The stars twinkled coldly, indifferent to the tragedy unfolding below. The moon, a silent witness, bathed the scene in Nandiri, silver light that did little to dispel the darkness of despair that had fallen upon the town. In the face of this overwhelming tragedy, the community was left grappling with the enormity of their loss, struggling to comprehend how their lives could have turned so abruptly from normalcy to utter devastation. The night wore on, each tick of the clock echoing the heavy silence, each passing moment another agonizing reminder of the lives that had been uprooted, of dreams that had been washed away. And as the survivors huddled together seeking comfort in their shared misery, they knew that this was just the beginning. The road to recovery was long and arduous, and they were left to face it in the aftermath of a nightmare that the sea had conjured and then cruelly refused to soothe. It is December 26, 2004. You are watching television in your living room when suddenly the news report cuts to a breaking news alert. There's been an earthquake off the coast of northern Sumatra. You live about 90 miles from the coast, and while earthquakes aren't uncommon where you live, this one was pretty strong. You just hope that it didn't cause a tsunami, but that thought quickly fades from your mind and you go back to watching TV. But then the phone rings. It's your friend. He lives by the ocean, and he's calling to ask if you saw the wave. What wave? You ask him. He tells you about the huge wave that just crashed into town. You don't believe him. There's no way a tsunami could have come all the way here. Still, something in his voice makes you worry for him. So you tell him you're coming over right away. You grab your keys and run out the door. Meanwhile, your friend is racing home from the beach. He had been surfing when the water around him suddenly started receding. As he paddled closer to shore, he saw the water continue to pull away until all that was left was a thin layer of water over the sand. Then, as he watched in disbelief, a massive wall of water rose up over the horizon and crashed into the shallows, sending debris flying through the air. When he realized what had happened, he dropped his board and began running for safety. His house wasn't too far away, but the wave caught up to him and swept him off his feet. Struggling to get himself upright, he pushed himself up onto his knees, coughing and sputtering seawater. Looking back, he saw his house had been completely destroyed, leveled by the force of the wave. He had lost everything, but at least he was okay. Also, he thought, because soon after he felt another jolt beneath his feet. The aftershock had arrived. The earthquake shook the ground violently, sending the water around him sloshing back and forth in his mouth. Unable to keep himself upright any longer, he collapsed onto the wet sand, burying his face in his hands as the earth continued to shake and rumble. You arrive at your friend's house, but he's not there. You do. However, find his dog. You kneel down and try to pet it, but the animal is skittish and unsure of what to do. Just then, the ground shakes beneath you. Startled, you stand up. The dog lets out a low growl and takes off running. As you turn to leave, you see a dark wall rising up in the distance. You can't quite make out what it is at first, but then the full horror of what you're seeing dawns on you. It's a tsunami. The wave crashes into the shore, sending people and debris flying through the air. You watch in horror as homes are swept away and people desperately flee for higher ground. And then you feel it, the water rising up around your legs. Before you can move, you're knocked off your feet and tossed into the churning water. Houses collapse all around you and people scream in terror as they struggle to stay upright. Branches and power lines whip through the air and cut deep gashes into the flesh of those who get too close. Trees snap like twigs and are carried away in the flood. As you struggle to keep yourself upright, you see your neighbor washed away. His bike skids across the concrete, his pet dog yelping as it clings to its leash. You reach out to help him, but there's nothing you can do. You are at the mercy of the wave now, and there is nothing left to do but ride it out. You wake up gasping for breath. Your body aches and you can feel deep scratches and gashes all over your arms and legs. Coughing up seawater, you push yourself up onto your elbows and look round. Everything is destroyed. Homes are in ruins, trees are uprooted, and debris is strewn everywhere. You stand up and walk toward the beach. As you get closer, you see a group of people standing knee-deep in the water, pulling someone from the wreckage of a building. You run over to help, but the man looks at you and says it's too late. He's already gone. They were trying to save him, but it was no use. He was dead. As you look out over the ocean, you realize the wave has receded and the water is still. You know more will be coming, though, and you need to get away from here. You spot a car and jump in. You drive down the road, passing houses that are reduced to splinters. People are running everywhere, some carrying their possessions with them, others fleeing for higher ground. The roads are blocked, though, and there's nowhere to go. You turn round and head back the other way. Then you see them, two children holding onto each other, crying out for their mother. You stop and get out and ask them where she is. They point to a crumpled figure lying face down in the water. You dive in and swim to her, pulling her out and beginning mouth-to-nose resuscitation. The kids scream and run away when they see what you're doing, but you don't care. This woman's still alive. She spits up seawater and coughs violently. You help her up and dust off her clothes, but she doesn't seem to recognize you. Trauma has addled her brain and she doesn't know who you are or where she is. You carry her to a patch of dry land and lay her down gently. She's going to be okay. You walk back to your car and see a family gathered together. A husband and wife are holding onto their two young children. Their faces are streaked with dirt and their clothes are torn and tattered. The husband looks at you and asks if you've seen anyone else. You shake your head and he nods, understanding the answer. His wife begins to cry. She was pregnant and lost the baby in the wave. There's nothing you can say to comfort them, so you simply put a hand on the husband's shoulder and walk away. You drive through the town, desperately searching for somewhere, anywhere you can go. But the roads are blocked and there's no escaping this place. You turn round and head back toward the beach. It's your only option. You can't outrun the wave, so you might as well face it head-on. Meanwhile, a full-scale rescue operation is underway. Soldiers, medical personnel, and volunteers are racing to the devastated area. They set up makeshift medical tents and tried areas, desperately trying to help everyone who can be saved. The death toll rises steadily, however, and it becomes clear that there aren't enough resources to help everyone. There simply aren't enough doctors, nurses, or medicine to go round. Days turn into weeks, and the survivors begin to piece together what happened. They learned that the tsunami was caused by an earthquake that was nearly 8 times more powerful than the one that leveled Hiroshima. It was the 3rd largest earthquake of the 20th century. More than 230,000 people were killed and entire villages were wiped off the map. Survivors are still finding human remains and personal belongings weeks after the disaster. They will never find out what happened to their loved ones, though. Many of the dead were never identified, and the authorities eventually had to resort to mass burials. A year goes by and you're still haunted by the disaster. Flashbacks of that day keep you up at night, and you can still hear the screams of children in your dreams. You try to move on, but it's hard when all around you are grieving as well. Every time you see a family gathered together, you think of the family you found separated and dead. You wanted to help, but there was nothing you could do. You survived the tsunami, but the scars it left on your soul will never fade. In the aftermath of the devastating 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, stories of heroism, tragedy, and survival emerged. While many lost everything and were traumatized for life, others displayed incredible courage and compassion. If you want to learn more about these stories, check out our other videos on the 2004 tsunami. And if you enjoyed this harrowing tale, please remember to like and subscribe before you go. Thank you for watching. This is the story of the 2004 tsunami. And this is Chapter 4, Washed Away. The sun was coming up over the Indian Ocean, splashing gold light onto the rippling waves. It was just another day at the beach for most of the people who lived along the coast. For some, it was a day like any other. They woke up early to take the children to school, then got down to work fixing fishing boats or preparing spices for market. But for others, the day began with a strange, inexplicable fear. A premonition that something terrible was going to happen, that this beautiful day would end in tragedy. Whatever it was, they couldn't shake it off. They tried to go about their business, but their hands trembled and their hearts pounded in their chests. Relatively far away, a massive earthquake had just struck off the coast of Sumatra. It registered an incredible 9.1 on the Richter scale, releasing an unspeakable amount of energy that created a colossal wave. How could anyone have known that this would happen? Even scientists can only predict earthquakes so accurately. Luckily, there were no seismographs near the epicenter to register the event. If there had been, the readings would have been garbled and misinterpreted. There simply wasn't any way for anyone to know what was about to unfold. But when the water receded from the shore, people knew something was wrong. An old fisherman pulled his boat up on the beach. He had felt the earth move beneath him while he was out in the sea. Now, he saw that the water was lower than he had ever seen it. He told the people on the beach, "Be careful. The water will come back and it will be very dangerous." But few took heed of his warning. After all, how could anyone have predicted such a disaster? Children ran into the shallows after the receding water, picking up crabs and colorful fish. Others hurried to unload cargo ships as they slid down the muddy banks. Everyone seemed to think that everything was fine. Suddenly, the sea roared back. A wall of water rose up over the horizon. People looked out to sea and realized with growing horror that the water was not receding as it should. It was coming straight for them. A woman carrying a basket of fruit on her head turned and ran as fast as she could. The water was upon her before she had taken more than a few steps. She stumbled and fell, scraping her knees and elbows on the hard ground. Her basket tipped over, sending mangoes and bananas rolling across the wet sand. She looked up at the water, her face drained of color. Then she scrambled to her feet and ran again, as fast as she could. People screamed and scattered as the wall of water crashed onto the beach. Houses collapsed like dominoes. Cars were tossed around like bath toys. Palm trees bowed and twisted until they snapped. People were swept off their feet and thrown into the churning water. Their screams were swallowed by the roar of the waves. Amidst the swirling chaos, a young couple clung to each other, trying to keep hold of one another as the water dragged them further and further out to sea. The woman screamed for help, her voice cracking with terror. Then she was sucked under the water and disappeared beneath the surface. The man flailed, desperately trying to keep his head above the water. His wife was gone, and now he was all alone. He wanted to stop fighting, to let the water take him, too. But he forced himself to keep swimming. He didn't want to die. Not yet anyway. He had to get himself upright and reach the shore. One step at a time. He kicked his feet and scissored with his arms, dragging himself closer and closer to safety. When he finally reached the shore, he collapsed on the beach, gasping for breath. He looked back at the water in disbelief. His wife was nowhere to be seen. Had she survived? He didn't know. He didn't care. All he could feel was the exhaustion that threatened to pull him under. He closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep on the beach. He woke up to the sound of crying. A little girl was sitting beside him, dabbing at his face with a piece of cloth. "Are you all right?" she asked him in broken English. He sat up and realized that he was covered in cuts and bruises. Blood had soaked through his t-shirt. His legs were scraped raw. As he slowly stood to his feet, he saw that the beach was littered with wreckage. Shattered glass crunched under his feet. Twisted metal glinted in the sunlight. Dead fish lay on the sand, their scales catching the light. The air was thick with the smell of salt and decay. The young man walked along the beach, past overturned boats and abandoned shoes, looking for his wife. He called her name over and over again, but she didn't answer. Just as he was about to give up hope, he saw her lying on the sand. She was face down in the mud, her hair covering her face. He rushed to her side and rolled her over. Her eyes were wide open and staring. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead. "Please," he whispered, kneeling beside her, hoping against hope that she would stir. But she didn't respond. She was already dead. He cradled her lifeless body in his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Round him, other survivors stumbled ashore, dazed and confused. Some were missing limbs, others were missing their minds. All of them were covered in blood and mud. Among them was the old fisherman. He looked out over the wreckage and shook his head sadly. "I tried to warn you," he said quietly. No one answered him. They were all too busy picking themselves up and trying to make sense of what had happened. As the sun climbed high in the sky, people began to emerge from the surrounding hills. They had heard the roar of the waves and rushed to the coast to see what had happened. When they saw the devastation, they fell to their knees and wept. Homes were destroyed, corpses strewn across the ground, belongings washed away. Everything was coated in a thick layer of mud. People wandered among the wreckage, calling out for loved ones who were never coming back. A group of men stood together, surveying the damage. They were arguing in hushed tones about what to do next. One of them, A burly man with a thick mustache suggested that they should leave the coast and head inland. "It's not safe here," he said, his voice shaking. "Who knows what else could happen?" Another man shook his head. "My family, they're still here. I have to find them. You can look for them tomorrow," the first man said. "Right now, we need to get out of here." He was worried that they might be hit by another wave. But really, he was terrified of what he had seen when he arrived at the coast. He had seen so much death and destruction that he feared he might go crazy if he stayed there any longer. One of the younger men stepped forward. "I want to stay too. Maybe I can help someone." "There's nothing you can do here," the older man snapped. "You don't understand. We have to get out of here." But the young man wouldn't listen. He turned and ran towards the devastated village, eager to help anyone who had survived the wave. The older man watched him go, his heart breaking. He knew that the young man was right. There was nothing more they could do here. But he also knew that they might be putting themselves in danger by staying. What if another wave hit? What if they were caught in the rising water again? He hesitated for a moment, torn between his duty to his family and the desire to help others. But in the end, he knew that he had to make the right decision for himself and his family. So he nodded at the others and said, "All right, let's go." They left the beach and headed inland, walking away from the wreckage and the haunting cries of the survivors. As they disappeared into the jungle, the only sound that could be heard was the lapping of the waves on the shore and the mournful cry of a lone seabird. That was chapter 4 of the story of the 2004 tsunami. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks for watching. This is an edition of our news program, focusing on stories that have affected us in 2004. It is hard to believe it has been 19 years since the Indian Ocean tsunami. On December 26, 2004, a magnitude 9.1 earthquake struck off the coast of Sumatra, Indonesia. The quake triggered a series of devastating tsunamis across the region. Coastal communities were wiped away in an instant. Homes, businesses, everything was washed into the sea. People who survived the initial wave often found themselves struggling in the aftermath, trying to piece together their lives and searching for their loved ones. Today, we look at what happened in the immediate aftermath of the tsunami. And if you like this video, please subscribe so you can be notified when our other videos are released. So where did they go? When the dust settled and the waters receded, there was an urgent need to help those who had survived the physical impact of the tsunami. But in many places, the only thing left standing was a smattering of houses. There wasn't enough room in them for all of the survivors, especially with thousands of people missing. So temporary shelters had to be built. It was a mammoth task. UN officials estimated the day after the tsunami that more than 50,000 houses had been destroyed in Indonesia alone. They also estimated that more than 1 million people had been displaced. Schools, government buildings, offices, community centers, any building that could provide some shelter from the elements or some protection from wild animals quickly filled up. The local hospitals struggled to cope with the sheer number of patients. There weren't enough doctors, nurses, or beds. Those who had lost limbs or suffered injuries that needed extensive treatment were given priority. Doctors operated round the clock in makeshift tents. In some cases, amputations were necessary because of the extent of the injuries. Others died from their wounds or from bacterial infections. The lack of clean water and basic sanitation meant that disease spread quickly through the camps. In addition to the physical injuries, there were also many people suffering from psychological trauma. Many witnesses described seeing their neighbors and friends get swept away by the wave and never saw them again. Some people were still waiting for their loved ones to return home, but sadly, most never did. Names on the wall. With so many people injured, no one knew the whereabouts of their loved ones. Many families didn't know if they were dead or alive. So they went to the hospitals and posted pictures of their missing family members on the walls. Some of the pictures were of children. A young girl holding a teddy bear, a smiling boy holding up a fish he'd caught. These images were heartbreaking and stark reminders of the human cost of the tsunami. Anyone who passed by would stop and check the list of names against their loved ones. Would cross things off when they found them, which was rare. Most of the time they just added more names to the list. These makeshift memorials were set up in other places too. On lamp posts, trees, shop fronts, anywhere that people could pin a photo of their loved one. These haunting images became symbols of hope and despair. Mass graves. As the days passed, the priority shifted from finding the missing to burying the dead. Mass graves were dug to stop the spread of disease. Teams of volunteers and soldiers used bulldozers to dig huge holes and lower the bodies into them. The dead were watched, wrapped in body bags and lowered into the ground. The scenes were chaotic and distressing. Family members wanted to spend a bit more time with their loved ones before they were buried. Sometimes people would try to take the body bags out of the grave. It was a traumatic and painful process for everyone involved. Families wept as they said goodbye to their loved ones. Many refused to accept that their relatives were dead. They kept returning to the mass graves, asking if their loved ones had been moved somewhere else. They were desperate to find their family and bury them properly. But there were just too many bodies to identify. A mother searches for her child. Amidst all the chaos and destruction, individual stories unfolded. Take, for example, the story of a mother named Yoti from Banda Aceh in Indonesia. She frantically searched for her 5-year-old son. He'd been swept away during the tsunami. She asked anyone she met if they'd seen him. She even went door to door looking for him. At night, she slept beside his bed, calling his name. After 4 days of searching, she went to the local hospital to see if he was there. She checked every ward, but he wasn't there. Then she saw a poster on the wall. It had a picture of her son. Someone had already put it there. Yoti couldn't believe it. It felt surreal. How could this be happening to her? Every parent's worst nightmare is the loss of a child. For Yoti, that nightmare became a reality. Her son's body was found 3 weeks later. She identified him by his teddy bear. He was clutching it tightly. Physicians Without Borders. When Dr. Jose arrived at the scene, he witnessed scenes of unimaginable devastation. Homes were destroyed. Corpses littered the floor, and desperate people filled the makeshift medical center. He soon realized that the scale of the disaster was far greater than anyone had anticipated. The situation was critical. Patients needing urgent care were being turned away due to the overwhelming number of casualties. As the hours passed, the realization of the magnitude of the tragedy sunk in. What they were facing was not just a medical crisis. It was a humanitarian catastrophe. Dr. Jose and his team sprang into action. They assessed the limited resources and devised a plan to make the best use of them. Triage tents were swiftly set up, allowing patients to be categorized based on the severity of their conditions. This helped the medical staff prioritize those who needed urgent attention, ensuring that the most critical cases were addressed first. Faced with shortages of essential supplies, Dr. House and his colleagues didn't let the challenges deter them. They utilized their ingenuity and adapted to the circumstances. Working alongside local staff, they implemented creative solutions to address the scarcity of equipment and medication. Despite the grim situation, Dr. Jose found moments of joy amidst the sorrow. The resilience of the human spirit shone through the kindness shown by patients towards one another, particularly those who had lost everything. They shared what little they had, offering water and food to those in greater need. Dr. Jose witnessed profound acts of humanity during those dark days, an enduring testament to the strength of the human spirit in the face of adversity. Grief. The full extent of the damage caused by the tsunami became clear in the days following the disaster. Entire villages were wiped off the map, reduced to a few broken walls and piles of debris. Homes, schools, and places of worship were destroyed. The once vibrant communities were now scenes of devastation. People stood among the wreckage trying to come to terms with what had happened. Their grief was etched on their faces, their eyes hollow with shock and sadness. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of waves crashing ashore and the cries of seagulls overhead. It was a landscape of immense sorrow. As the survivors began to comprehend the full scale of the tragedy, the depth of their grief became immeasurable. They mourned the loss of their loved ones, their homes, and their way of life. The tsunami had not just taken their possessions, it had ripped apart the fabric of their communities. The sense of loss extended beyond the physical. It had eroded a part of their souls. In the face of such overwhelming grief, the survivors found solace in each other. They shared stories of their losses, their voices cracking with emotion as they recounted the moments before the tsunami struck. There was a strange comfort in knowing that others understood their pain, that they were not alone in their sorrow. Piercing sorrow. The days that followed were filled with funerals. Coffins were placed side by side in mass graves, each one representing a life cut short, a family torn apart. The coastal towns resembled a scene from a post-apocalyptic movie. Homes were destroyed, belongings scattered, roads were cracked. The silence was heavy with the weight of the tragedy that had unfolded. Survivors wandered through the ruins, numb with shock. Their faces were etched with grief, their eyes vacant, reflecting the depths of their sorrow. The world they once knew had vanished beneath the waves, leaving behind a haunting landscape of loss and despair. Amidst the ruins, makeshift memorials sprung up, a testament to the lives that had been lost. Flowers, candles, and photographs adorned the sites where people had disappeared, each item a symbol of the love and remembrance that transcended the physical world. The air was thick with the scent of incense and the whispers of prayers. The survivors gathered round these memorials, seeking solace in shared grief, their tears mingling with the salty ocean breeze. When the initial shock wore off, a new wave of emotion surged through the survivors, piercing sorrow. The full realization of their loss crashed over them, bringing with it an agonizing depth of grief. It was a pain that cut through their numbness, leaving them shattered and heartbroken. The faces of their loved ones, their laughter and their touch, all vivid memories that now only served to intensify the torment of their absence. The survivors grappled with the haunting questions that echoed in their minds. Why? Why did this happen? Why were they spared while others were taken away? The answers, like the bodies of their loved ones, remained elusive, lost in the depths of the ocean. And that's the end of this edition. If you liked the video, please subscribe so you can be notified when our other videos are released. I'm from NPR. It's been 18 years since the 2004 tsunami. On December of that year, a magnitude 9.1 earthquake struck off the coast of Sumatra in Indonesia. It was one of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded. And within minutes, it generated a monstrous wave that slammed into 14 countries round the Indian Ocean. In all, The tsunami claimed more than 230,000 lives. Here in the America, more than 700 people were killed. That day, December 26, 2004, is now known as the Boxing Day tsunami, and in the immediate aftermath, news outlets compare it to the Great Wave of 1883, which had also struck round these same islands in Indonesia. But whereas the 1883 tsunami was mostly forgotten, the 2004 disaster was seared into our collective memory, in part because of the way it upended our sense of safety and security. Until then, tsunamis were something that happened far away. But after 2004, we knew that no place was truly safe. And this knowledge changed the way we talked about disaster preparedness. Communities invested in early warning systems and public education campaigns. And people like you started heeding those calls for action. You built your own emergency kits. You made plans with your families and friends. You researched evacuation routes. And some of you even started writing letters to be delivered in the event that you and your loved ones didn't make it. Hi, I'm here with an encore presentation of letters from the Biggie, a series where we read listener letters. We asked you to send us yours for a chance to have your story produced. And today, we're rereading 3 stories from our archives that were sent in the wake of the 2004 tsunami. Our writers are 2 women from different generations and a man who wrote to his unborn child. He never got to meet. All 3 stories were originally published in our series All Things Considered. If you'd like to learn more about the 2004 tsunami, there's a link to a special we produced in the show notes. Also, if you would like to submit your own letter to the editor, you can do so through the provided link. And if you enjoy these letters, please leave us a review. Our first letter is called Echoes in the Sand. It starts, I have a 6-year-old son. He talks non-stop about how much he loves me, and how proud he is of me, and what a great job I am doing as a mom. I love him with all my heart. I hope I can pass on to him my values of compassion and empathy and not hate or fear, although I am scared to death of him going into the ocean. The writer, Sarah, is describing how she was affected by the 2004 tsunami and why she won't let her son go into the water. When the tsunami hit, Sarah was living in Thailand with her husband and young son. They were only there a month, and the family had planned to leave for home on January. But Sarah's husband wanted to spend one last night at their beach bungalow, and he convinced her to stay. The next morning, they packed up, walked to the beach, and saw the destruction left behind by the wave. Their bungalow was gone. Their bikes were smashed and littered across the beach, and the normally turquoise water was a murky brown. She and her husband were covered in cuts and bruises. They had lost nothing, but everything. Sarah writes, when we returned to our hotel room, we pulled out the digital camera. Thankfully, we had taken photos of Sam's 6th birthday party. Other than that, we had no pictures of him. There was nothing else we could salvage. The rest of the trip was spent trying to find a new flight home, consoling crying children, watching relief helicopters and boats buzzing round, and praying we wouldn't get sick from all the food and water we couldn't keep down. I kept thinking I'd feel guilty if I got sick. What right did I have to get sick when so many other people had lost so much? Upon returning home, Sarah and her husband split up. She raised their son alone and watched him grow up afraid of the water and uninterested in swimming lessons. She realized that her anxiety had rubbed off on him. One day, he asked her why she was afraid of the ocean, and she lied and said it was just a silly superstition. She writes, the reality is that I will always worry about him going into the ocean. The emotional toll of losing my home, my possessions, my husband, My peace of mind and part of myself has taken years to recover from. I am fortunate to be alive. I know that I could have prevented him from being born had I not been rescued. I don't resent my rescuers. I resent the fact that I survived. I suppose that this is why I can't bring myself to put my child in danger. To some, this may sound dramatic or ridiculous, but this is the way I feel. And now our second letter, which begins, I am writing this letter to try to express the gaping hole in my life caused by the death of my daughter. The writer, Nancy, is remembering her late daughter, Lauren. In December of 2004, Nancy's daughter, Lauren, was on vacation in Thailand. She had just finished her junior year of high school and was looking forward to graduating the following spring. She dreamed of becoming a marine biologist. She spent her time traveling and working at various aquariums. When Lauren learned about the tsunami, she thought it would be cool to see. At first, she wanted to take a video for her school's TV program. Then she decided to walk along the beach and take some pictures. By the time she turned round, the water had risen. She took off running. Her friends tried to help, but the water knocked them over. The current dragged Lauren out to sea. The last thing she remembered was grabbing onto a tree. When the water receded, Lauren's friends found her phone and backpack on the beach. Her mom, Nancy, received a call saying that Lauren had been missing for 3 days. She flew to Thailand with her husband, but their worst fears were confirmed when they arrived at the hospital. Lauren's body was already there. Nancy writes, "The tsunami took my only child and it took her just as she was spreading her wings to fly. I miss seeing her, hearing about her, joking with her, hugging her, protecting her, loving her. I miss the good times and the bad. The pain of missing her has never diminished. Instead, it keeps resurfacing. No matter what I do, I can't escape the pain. My husband and I are still together, which I know Lauren would want. We both feel a deep void in our lives, but we support each other." After the tragedy, Nancy channeled her grief into activism. She helped establish a scholarship fund in Lauren's honor and worked with various advocacy groups. In March of 2005, she testified before a House subcommittee that was considering legislation to enhance tsunami warning systems. Nancy told the lawmakers that it wasn't too late to prevent another tragedy. Our final letter goes to a child who may or may not be born. It starts, "If you are born, your dad loved you very much." The writer, Pete, is addressing his unborn child. On December of 2004, Pete was visiting Thailand with his girlfriend, and they decided to get an early start and beat the crowds. So while everyone else was sleeping in, they drove to the coast and parked near a small village. As they stood on the beach, they heard a rumble and felt the ground shake. The water receded, revealing a sandy bottom. Pete's girlfriend said it looked beautiful and she took some pictures. Then, without warning, a wall of water rose in the distance. Pete grabbed his girlfriend's hand and they ran. A local man shouted at them to run faster. Pete and his girlfriend reached higher ground and watched the wave crash over the road and sweep away their car. Later, they returned to the spot where they had parked to find debris scattered around them. The water had taken the car and crumpled it like aluminum foil. Pete writes, "At that point, I knew my baby was gone. I sat down on the road, dirt road, and cried. That's when I really knew I loved you. Your dad knew you existed. He saw your ultrasound picture. He named you Tate and promised to love you with all his heart. I know you didn't deserve any of this, but your dad hoped you might have been happy to have him as your dad. It's hard for me to think about what I would have been like, what you would have been like, how our lives would have turned out had we gotten back to our lives. I still think about you often and wonder if you would have been happy with me. I hope you are happy wherever you are. In the aftermath of the tsunami, Pete struggled with survivor's guilt and post-traumatic stress. But eventually he went back to work. Got married, bought a house, traveled to Thailand to visit the memorial and volunteered with a non-profit that provides clean water to communities in developing town. Stories have a funny way of finding you when you least expect it. Sometimes they are handed to you, dropped into your lap fully formed, demanding to be told. Other times, they weave themselves into your life like vines, tendrils of narrative inching their way into your thoughts until you feel compelled to follow them. This is one such story. It arrived in bits and pieces, a cascade of letters, voicemails and journal fragments that tumbled into my inbox over a period of months. The sender, a woman named Lily, was reluctant to reveal herself. She signed her messages with just 2 letters, A, R, and spoke in hushed tones, as if afraid to wake someone from their sleep. All I knew about her was that she was in her early 20s, lived in England, and had a connection to the 2004 tsunami. Those 4 words hung in the air between our messages like a shroud, heavy with unspoken grief. This is what she wrote. Dear AR, how are you? My name is not important. What is important is why I am writing to you. I want to tell my story, but I don't know how or even if I should. You see, I lost my sister in the tsunami. I was only 8 years old, and since then I've never really spoken about it. But recently I've been having these dreams. They are always the same. I dream that I'm back on holiday, walking along the beach with my sister. We stop to take a picture of the sunset, and then we start to run. The water behind us gets closer and closer, and I try to call out for help, but no sound comes out of my mouth. And then I wake up. And every time I wake up, I cry because I can't save her. Lily's story is an echo of a tragedy that reverberated across the world. A catastrophe so vast and sudden it stole lives, livelihoods and futures in an instant. On December 26, 2004, a magnitude 9.1 earthquake struck off the coast of Sumatra, Indonesia. It unleashed a monstrous wave, a tsunami that barreled across the Indian Ocean at 500 miles per hour, crashing into coastal communities with devastating force. In 14 countries, more than 230,000 people were killed, including dozens of children who were on holiday with their parents. Families were torn apart, some broken beyond repair, but like many of the most harrowing stories, this one doesn't end there. It has layers upon layers, each one as haunting as the last. The day before the tsunami, a young woman named Anita Richmond made a series of eerily prophetic journal entries. She wrote about death and rebirth, about the sea's untamed power. And then she captured a fleeting thought, a premonition that turned out to be uncannily prescient. If I die, she wrote, please don't let my children be brought up by my husband. He's too cold. 3 days later, Anita was swept away by the relentless waves, leaving behind her 2 young daughters, Lily and Daisy. Her husband, Mark, was killed in the initial earthquake. Now the girls were orphans, left in the care of their maternal grandparents. Years passed. Lily and Daisy grew up, carrying the weight of their past like a stone in their pocket. Then, one day, when Lily was 17, her grandmother found an old box filled with Anita's belongings, including a stack of letters addressed to Lily and Daisy, each one more heartbreaking than the last. There were birthday cards, notes, even a Christmas list, all penned by a mother who never got the chance to say goodbye. In the quiet of her room, Lily pored over the words, searching for answers, for a glimpse of the mother she'd never known. She found a letter addressed to her specifically. It began, "My darling Lily, if anything ever happens to me, please know that you are loved more than words can say." As Lily read, she felt a connection to her mother, a bond that transcended the boundaries of time. It was as though Anita's spirit was reaching out from beyond the grave, whispering stories of love and longing. Suddenly, the walls of Lily's room seemed to dissolve, replaced by the warm embrace of the Indian Ocean. She could hear the laughter of children, feel the soft sand between her toes. She was on holiday with her family, living those precious moments she'd only dreamed of. But the idyllic scene was shattered by a terrifying roar. The ground beneath her feet trembled, the ocean surged forward, threatening to engulf everything in its path. In that heart-stopping moment, Lily knew she had to do something, anything to save her little sister. She grabbed Daisy's hand and raced away from the advancing wave, her heart pounding in her chest. But it was too late. The water crashed over them, pulling them under its surface. Lily woke up on the beach, disoriented and alone. She called out for a Daisy, her voice cracking with fear. Where was her sister? Had she been taken by the current? Panic surged through her as she searched the shoreline, desperation clawing at her throat. Then she saw it, a small figure lying motionless on the sand. Lily rushed to her sister's side, her heart breaking at the sight before her. Daisy's skin was as white as snow, her breathing shallow and weak. Adrenaline surged through Lily, propelling her into action. She rolled Daisy onto her back, frantically pressing on her chest, willing her sister to breathe. But Daisy's eyes remained closed, her body limp in Lily's arms. Grief threatened to consume her, but Lily pushed it down, clinging to the belief that she could still save her sister. She remembered an episode of a medical drama she'd watched on TV, mouth-to-nose resuscitation. It was a long shot, but she had to try. Kneeling on the beach, salt water stinging her eyes, Lily covered her mouth with daisies, blowing into her sister's lungs. Time seemed to stand still, the cries of seagulls the only sound in the vast emptiness around her. Then, miraculously, Daisy coughed, sputtering seawater. Relief washed over Lily, bringing tears to her eyes. She had saved her sister, but the ordeal had taken its toll. Daisy's heart had already stopped beating once, and now it fluttered weakly, hanging on by a thread. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the beach, Lily knew she needed help. She stumbled to her feet, her legs shaking, and started to run. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away from the beach, from the ghosts that haunted it. She ran until she collapsed, her body a vessel of exhaustion and despair. When she finally looked back, the familiar beach had become a haunting specter, the waves crashing relentlessly against the shore like a dirge for the lives that had been lost. The next few days were a blur. Lily vaguely remembered doctors working over Daisy, their faces grim, their voices hushed. She also recalled her grandparents arriving, their eyes filled with sorrow, their embrace a silent promise to stay by her side. But it was in the quiet moments, when she was alone with her thoughts, that the full weight of what had happened crashed down on her. The pain of losing her mother, the guilt of surviving when others hadn't, the fear that Daisy wouldn't make it. These emotions threatened to overwhelm her, threatening to drag her under. One evening, as Lily sat by Daisy's bedside, holding her hand, she felt a surge of determination. She would not let her sister go. Not now, not ever. Drawing strength from an unknown source, Lily leaned in and whispered, "You have to fight, Daisy. For Mummy, For Grandad and Nana, for me. Please don't leave me alone. And Daisy, as if responding to Lily's plea, squeezed her hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Hope, fragile as it was, flickered within Lily. Maybe her sister would pull through after all. After 10 days, Daisy opened her eyes. When Lily rushed to her side, relief flooding her features, Daisy's first words were, "Where's Mummy?" Lily's heart cracked at the question. How could she tell her little sister that their mother was gone? That the woman whose face adorned the countless cards in the box would never return? Unable to bear the pain of that moment, Lily excused herself, fleeing to the privacy of the bathroom where she collapsed, overcome with grief. Now, more than a decade later, Lily finds herself haunted by the past. The joyful memories of her childhood overshadowed by the tragedy that befell her family. Her dreams are plagued by visions of the tsunami, each one a painful reminder of her loss. In the silence of her room, she can almost hear her mother's voice, feel her touch. The letters and voicemails she received from her Aunt Julia after the tsunami are her lifeline to that past. Through them, she learns more about her mother and the life they could have shared. In one particularly poignant message, Aunt Julia describes Anita's unwavering dedication to her daughters, the lengths she would go to protect them, even in the face of death. She recalls how Anita had taught Lily and Daisy to swim, instilling in them a love for the water, unaware that it would one day become their greatest challenge. As Lily listens to these messages, she realizes that she is not alone in her grief. Others have suffered too. She thinks of the countless families torn apart by the tsunami, the friends and neighbors whose lives were also uprooted by the disaster. A sense of responsibility washes over her. She wants to honor her mother's memory, to keep her legacy alive by helping others who have experienced similar tragedies. With newfound purpose, Lily reaches out to a local support group for survivors of traumatic events. She hesitates at first, unsure if she's ready to share her story, but something compels her forward. Perhaps it's the hope that by speaking her truth, she can find a measure of peace. Or maybe it's the desire to ensure that her mother's memory lives on, that the love they shared continues to resonate in the world long after the waves have receded. And so Lily, guided by the echoes of the past, steps into the light, ready to confront her demons and find solace in the strength of human connection. Hi, I'm the host. This is our channel. On December 26, 2004, a massive undersea earthquake off the coast of Sumatra, Indonesia, unleashed one of the most destructive tsunamis in recorded history. Waves up to 30 meters high slammed into 14 countries round the Indian Ocean, killing more than 227,000 people. Entire villages were wiped off the map. Homes, businesses, schools, and hospitals were destroyed. It was an unprecedented catastrophe. But amid the devastation wrought by the waves, there were stories of survival and resilience. In the aftermath, communities across the affected regions came together to grieve, to heal and to rebuild their lives. They reached for hope in the face of despair and found strength in their shared humanity. Today, we look at how people across the affected countries coped with the tragedy. And now back to the story. We'll begin our journey in Thailand, where millions of Buddhist, Muslim, and Christian Thai citizens came to terms with the disaster in their own unique ways. The massive wave that struck the country's southern coast killed more than 5,000 people. Many of those who survived were left homeless or injured. In the hard-hit resort town of Phuket, Buddhist monks led funeral rites for victims whose bodies were brought to a temporary mortuary at a school. Among them was a family of 5 from Denmark. Their bodies were placed side by side in the open air. At the head of the coffins, white flowers were laid out in the shape of a heart. After the ceremony, the remains were taken away for cremation. Across the street from the mortuary, another ritual was taking place. A group of women clad in saffron robes sat cross-legged on the ground before a small altar. Incense smoke curled upward toward images of Buddha and a portrait of the king. These women were performing a Buddhist purification ritual called Bot. They were praying for the dead and seeking solace for the living. Some 200 kilometers north of Phuket in the village of Kamela, hundreds of mourners gathered to pay respects to those lost in the wave. Among them were volunteers from a local animal welfare organization. They had come to honor the memory of some 30 dogs and cats who drowned when the water receded, leaving their leashes and collars behind. In the Aceh province of Indonesia, the epicenter of the tsunami, entire villages vanished beneath the waves. The town of Banda Aceh, a provincial capital, was all but leveled. More than 100,000 people perished. Hospitals and clinics were overwhelmed. Some of the injured and traumatized survivors were treated in makeshift facilities set up in people's homes. One such facility was established by French aid worker Sophie Piquet de Lameth. She opened her home to treat victims free of charge. In her garden, she set up beds for the wounded and delivered first aid, assisted by 2 doctors and 3 nurses. Meanwhile, her husband, Hamantu, manned the kitchen, preparing meals for the patients and their relatives. In the neighboring province of North Sumatra, thousands of people took part in mass cleansing rituals to purify themselves after losing loved ones or their homes in the tsunami. These rituals were rooted in local customs, beliefs, and values. Survivors washed themselves and their belongings with holy water while reciting prayers. It was a way for them to cope with their grief and find peace amidst the wreckage of their lives. The tsunami also hit India, Sri Lanka, and Malaysia, killing more than 2,000 people. People in the coastal state of Tamil Nadu reeled from the loss of their loved ones and property. For many, their world had been reduced to the clothes on their backs and the documents they held in their hands. In the aftermath, Indian naval ships and helicopters were deployed to deliver food, water, and medical supplies to survivors. Medical camps were set up across the state to treat the injured, and relief operations were carried out by the National Disaster Management Authority and non-governmental organizations. One such organization was the Red Cross Society of India. Its volunteers distributed relief materials to tsunami victims in Nagapattinam district. The items included blankets, clothing, food, kerosene, mosquito nets, soap, and candles. The Red Cross also provided financial assistance to the bereaved families of fishermen who were lost at sea. In the nearby state of Puducherry, a former French colony, the French government sent a military medical team to help the victims. Doctors, nurses, and pharmacists set up shop in a school building, providing free treatment to survivors. On the island nation of Sri Lanka, more than 30,000 people were killed and countless others injured. Relief operations were launched by the Sri Lankan Navy. Naval personnel were sent to affected areas to distribute essential supplies. They were also involved in search and rescue operations, helping to locate and recover bodies and providing medical aid to those in need. In the aftermath of the disaster, people across the country came together to support each other. Buddhist monks and nuns visited affected villages to offer prayers and condolences. Hindus performed religious ceremonies to honor the dead. Muslims held special prayers in mosques and Christians conducted church services. Amid the tragedy, stories of courage, compassion, and unity emerged. In the town of Negombo, Catholic priest Cyril Gamini Fernando tended to the sick and dying without regard for his own safety. He was praised as a hero for his selflessness and dedication in the face of danger. On Christmas Day, just days after the tsunami, Fernando and 4 other Catholic priests from the Negombo Archdiocese were killed when a second wave struck the area. Their bodies were found near the church they had been repairing after the initial wave. Despite the personal tragedy he had endured, Father Fernando's nephew, Sajan Daniel, told the New York Times, "He always said, if a tsunami comes, I will go down with my people." As the world mourned the loss of life and property caused by the tsunami, questions were raised about how to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Scientists worked tirelessly to understand the disaster and develop early warning systems to alert coastal communities of impending tsunamis. They studied data from seismic sensors, tide gauges and ocean buoys to improve forecasting and preparedness. The Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO, along with the Intergovernmental Coordination Group for the Tsunami Warning and Mitigation in the Indian Ocean, worked to establish a comprehensive tsunami warning system in the region. This system included a network of buoys and coastal monitoring stations that could detect and relay information about potential tsunami threats. These efforts aimed to create a robust early warning system that would give people in vulnerable areas precious minutes to seek higher ground, ultimately saving lives and reducing the impact of future tsunamis. Today, memorials and museums stand as reminders of the tragedy and its impact on the affected communities. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami remains a stark reminder of the destructive power of nature and the importance of preparedness and resilience in the face of disaster. It also stands as a testament to the human spirit as communities around the world continue to heal, rebuild, and find strength in unity. That was our story for today. If you liked it, don't forget to like and share it with your friends and family. Subscribe to get notified when we upload new stories. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. The tsunami struck at 7:58 a.m. on December 26, 2004. It was Sunday. People were just waking up or getting ready to start their day when giant waves swept through 14 countries, leaving death and destruction in its wake. It's hard to believe that it's been 19 years since this catastrophe struck. And yet there are some things that we remember very clearly, like those who survived the disaster and rebuilt their lives from scratch. It's me. Welcome to this channel. Today, we'll be sharing with you a heart-wrenching story about the 2004 tsunami and how people managed to cope with the aftermath of this terrible tragedy. If you want to find out more, then stay until the end. All the links to the sources are provided below. 2004 Tsunami Story 10. The Edge of a Promise. We have collected stories from all over the world. You'll be able to hear a lot of tragic stories, but also see how people pulled together after the tsunami. Even though each country affected by the tsunami was different, they all had one thing in common: ordinary people helping each other. This photo shows some Indonesian children playing near the ruins of their school. The elementary school in the fishing village of Bangka Belitung was destroyed during the tsunami. When the water receded, it left behind a pile of debris and shattered hopes. These children lost not only their school, but also many of their friends and relatives. But even so, they still tried to maintain a positive attitude and help each other. Their smiles tell us that no matter how difficult the situation is, we should always try to find reasons to smile, because that's the only way to survive. For the Indonesian government, rebuilding the school took several months. But in the meantime, classes were held outdoors. Despite the difficulties, local residents were grateful for the opportunity to get an education. Every day, dozens of children headed to the makeshift classrooms. Among them was Reti, a girl who miraculously survived the tsunami. Her parents passed away, but she was taken in by her aunt. She was one of the lucky ones. A year after the tsunami, many families were still living in tents. However, the most important thing for the Indonesians was to clear the debris from their land. In addition to the school, the tsunami destroyed more than 10,000 houses in the city. So, it's not surprising that clearing the debris from the streets took almost 2 months. The locals did everything they could to restore order and rebuild their lives. After the tsunami, the whole world mourned the loss of thousands of people. Indonesia was hit the hardest. More than 140,000 people died there, including 75 children. After the giant wave, thousands of corpses floated along the coast. The Indonesian army did everything it could to collect them as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, the local residents didn't have enough resources to deal with this problem. They needed help from abroad. An Indian naval ship called the Mysore arrived in the area first, whose crew members helped bury the bodies. Then a US Navy aircraft carrier, the Constellation, came to help. However, the sailors faced an even bigger problem than they expected. The stench from the corpses was so bad that it was impossible to approach the coastal towns. There was simply no way they could do anything until the bodies were removed. The smell attracted flies and mosquitoes, which spread various diseases. That's why the US military built large-scale facilities to dispose of the corpses. Eventually, 13,000 bodies were buried on the island of Bintan. During the tragedy, many families were torn apart and lost each other. Children were separated from their parents, and some even lost their entire families. In total, more than 1,000 children were left without parental care. Volunteers from various countries did everything they could to reunite them with their families. For example, an Australian woman named Fiona Tia volunteered with the Red Cross. She traveled to Indonesia to look for her son Harry, who went missing during the tsunami. Fiona never gave up hope and eventually found him. Later, she shared her joy with reporters. "I feel like I've won the lottery. I'm happier than anyone else," she said. Fiona spent weeks looking for her son among the faces of the rescued children. When I saw his face, I realized that my search was over. He recognized me too. It felt like a miracle. In the aftermath of the tsunami, many people found themselves in a difficult position. Some lost their homes, others lost their loved ones. However, everyone coped with grief in their own way. For example, photographer Jonas Bendixson visited a small village in northern Sumatra, where he captured the poignant scenes of a mother crying over the grave of her husband and son. The man and the boy were killed by the tsunami. The woman was rescued by a local resident. She told me that the biggest problem for her now is that there's no one to talk to. No one understands what she's going through. And even if they did, no one could help, Jonas recalled. Many survivors suffered not only physically, but psychologically. They experienced post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, and other mental health problems. It was a real shock for them, especially since many people couldn't even realize what was happening. One woman later recalled, "It all happened so fast that I didn't have time to think. 1 minute everything was fine, and the next minute I was swept away by a huge wall of water. I tried to call my husband, but the phone was dead. I thought he must be dead. I cried out to him, but there was no answer. I was completely alone." After the tragedy, many people wondered if it was a punishment from above. A survivor from Malaysia shared her thoughts. "We feel so guilty that we survived. Our relatives and neighbors died. How can we go on living? What's the point?" Of course, such questions tormented not only her but also other survivors. Each person found their own answers. Some turned to religion, while others sought support from psychologists. The tsunami caused enormous damage, not only to people's mental health, but also to the environment. The waves destroyed coral reefs, mangrove forests, and coastal protection facilities. Marine life suffered greatly. Dead fish washed up on the shores of Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia. To prevent an environmental disaster, experts had to take urgent measures. For example, workers from the Eilat Coral Reef Center in Israel offered to help the Thai people save their coral reefs. An Israeli organization specializing in the cultivation of coral sends full tons of coral larvae to Thailand. Moreover, volunteers from around the world joined the initiative. Together, they planted more than 100,000 corals, which served as a foundation for restoring the underwater ecosystem. However, not only nature suffered, but also the economy. The tsunami claimed hundreds of thousands of jobs. Fishermen lost their boats and now couldn't earn money. Hotels and restaurants were closed. The tsunami completely paralyzed the economies of the affected countries. Many people were left without work and had nothing to feed themselves or their children. In the aftermath of the tragedy, governments and non-governmental organizations pledged billions of dollars to help the affected countries. For example, the US. Government allocated $350 million to assist Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Malaysia. But despite such assistance, the recovery process was slow and painful. One woman from Malaysia shared her story with reporters. She had a shop in the resort town of Penang, which was destroyed during the tsunami. My business was my livelihood. Now I'm penniless. I don't know how I'll support myself and my children, she lamented. Another Malaysian citizen said, "The government has allocated us temporary housing, but what will happen next? Who will answer for our lost businesses?" The tsunami took away not only our homes, but also our jobs and means of making money. As you can see, the tsunami had a profound impact on people's lives, causing not only physical but also psychological trauma, as well as severe economic damage. The recovery process was long and difficult, both for individuals and entire communities. A few months after the tsunami, the world began to slowly rebuild. New houses appeared, shops opened, and children returned to school. Of course, the scars from the tragedy remained, but the people affected by the tsunami learned to live with them. They say that every cloud has a silver lining. So let's look at the brighter side. Perhaps the tsunami was a turning point for them. It showed them that it is important to appreciate every moment of your life and be grateful for every new day. After all, life is unpredictable, and we don't know what challenges it may bring us. The main thing is to always remember that we're not alone. There are people who can help us, listen to us, and support us in difficult times. And no matter how difficult the situation may seem, we should never lose hope. Please share your thoughts in the comments and remember to subscribe to the channel. In December 2004, 146,000 people were killed by a tsunami that struck 14 countries around the Indian Ocean. The disaster was so large it wiped out entire villages and triggered what some called a tsunami safety revolution. Countries built early warning systems and moved vulnerable populations away from the coast. They also learned something else. When villagers in Indonesia spoke to researchers about how they experienced the 2004 tsunami, their descriptions matched up with local legends about a sea monster. And those legends might have saved lives. In this episode, We're going to explore the story of the 2004 tsunami and how scientists and locals are working together to protect coastal communities from future disasters. But first, if you're new here, welcome to my channel. Every week we bring you stories about the amazing animals and incredible people from around the world who are working to save our planet. On December 26, 2004, an earthquake measuring 9.1 on the Richter scale struck off the coast of Sumatra, Indonesia. It was the third largest earthquake ever recorded. The megaquake sent a massive amount of energy into the water, creating a series of waves that spread outwards in all directions. These waves, known as tsunamis, grew as they approached shallow water near shore, peaking at heights of up to 30 meters or 100 feet. Entire villages were wiped away by the force of the water. Homes were tossed like toys, cars floated past coconut trees, and people were swept out to sea. It's hard to overstate the devastation caused by the 2004 tsunami. It affected 14 countries, including Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, Thailand, Malaysia, and the Maldives. The 2004 tsunami was one of the deadliest natural disasters in history. It led to sweeping changes in how we prepare for such events. Governments around the world developed early warning systems and evacuation plans. They also began researching exactly what happened in 2004 and why certain areas were hit harder than others. Geologists knew the cause of the 2004 tsunami was an earthquake, but they didn't know exactly where and when the quake occurred. No one had ever recorded an earthquake happening that far below the surface. But in the years since then, environmental scientists have used a variety of tools to piece together what happened in 2004. To better understand future risks, researchers analyzed sediment samples from the ocean floor, looking for evidence of the megaquake. Their results were published in the journal Quaternary Science Reviews in 2020. They found evidence of the massive displacement of sediment along the 1,200 kilometers or 750-mile section of the Sumatran fault line. This was the first time scientists could actually measure the length of the fault rupture, which turned out to be almost twice as long as previously thought. They also determined that the rupture started in the southern part of the fault line and propagated or moved northward. This produced a series of slow slip events, which contributed to the formation of the 2004 tsunami. Sediment samples also helped researchers understand how the tsunami wave spread across the Indian Ocean. They discovered that the northern section of the fault line ruptured first. This released most of the energy that formed the tsunami, but a smaller rupture farther south added to its power. The researchers concluded that the sequence of ruptures may have played a role in the tsunami's size and shape, information that will help scientists improve future tsunami forecasts. But scientists weren't the only ones studying the 2004 tsunami. Local communities also had stories to tell. In many coastal villages, memories of the disaster were passed down through generations. Elders recalled their grandparents telling tales of a sea monster that occasionally rose up from the depths to gobble up boats and people. These legends described a massive underwater upheaval that drew water upwards and sucked everything into the sea. Some dismissed these stories as myths, but researchers realized they might hold valuable information about how people experienced the 2004 tsunami. So they began interviewing locals to see if there were any similarities. What they heard was remarkable. People described the same signs of the sea monster before the 2004 tsunami, including a rumbling noise coming from the sea, bubbling water and receding waves. Many said the sea pulled back about 30 meters or 100 feet, exposing the seabed. Others described a wall of water rising in the distance, and still others saw debris carried out to sea by swirling currents. These descriptions were strikingly similar to what scientists later determined actually happened in 2004. The rumbling noise came from the undersea earthquake. The receding waves were caused by the initial tsunami. The wall of water in the distance was created by the approaching wave, and the debris was swept away by the current. The scientists concluded that folklore and science were converging. Locals had been observing the sea for hundreds of years, passing down their knowledge of its behavior from generation to generation. Meanwhile, modern science was just beginning to understand what caused the 2004 tsunami and how it affected the region. By sharing their findings with local communities, scientists hope to raise awareness of the signs that precede a tsunami. If enough people remember these signs and take action when they notice them, lives could be saved. Researchers are now working to integrate traditional knowledge with scientific understanding in order to create a more effective tsunami early warning system. One of the most important aspects of this is building trust between scientists and local communities. In some places, researchers have struggled to gain the trust of locals who blame scientists for not predicting the 2004 tsunami. In other areas, locals have been wary of government officials who ordered them to move away from the coast after the disaster. Scientists are working hard to overcome these barriers so they can learn from each other and work together to protect coastal communities. Efforts are underway in several countries, including Indonesia, India, Sri Lanka, the Maldives. In Indonesia, researchers worked with local fishermen to develop buoys that can detect changes in sea level. These buoys are designed to float to the surface when a tsunami strikes, alerting people on shore to take cover. Fishermen are trained to report any unusual ocean activity to local officials. If they notice the sea retreating, making a strange noise or bubbling, they know to contact the authorities right away. The Maldives is another country where scientists are working to integrate local knowledge with Western science. Maldivian folklore includes stories of a sea serpent that lives in the ocean depths. According to legend, the sea serpent rises to the surface to warn people of an impending tsunami. Scientists have developed a buoy that will alert people in the Maldives if the sea recedes more than 3 meters or 10 feet. The buoy will trigger a siren and flash red lights, just like the sea serpent in legend. In India, scientists are working with local fishermen to develop early warning systems. They've noticed that fish tend to swim to higher ground before a tsunami strikes, so they're training fishermen to look out for unusual fish behavior. If they see fish swimming in unusual patterns or heading toward higher ground, they know to take cover. Sri Lanka is another country where scientists are working to incorporate local knowledge into early warning systems. There, a team of researchers has developed a mobile phone app that sends alerts about potential tsunamis. The app also allows people to report any unusual ocean activity they observe. All of these efforts are still in the early stages, but they show promise. By combining the latest scientific findings with the traditional knowledge of local communities, scientists hope to create a more effective early warning system for tsunamis that could save countless lives. The 2004 tsunami was a tragedy that affected millions of people around the world. But in the aftermath, there has been progress. Early warning systems and evacuation plans are now in place in many coastal communities. And scientists are working to improve these systems by incorporating local knowledge of the sea. The people who live near the coast have been observing the ocean for generations, and they've learned a great deal about its behavior. By sharing this knowledge with scientists, they can help protect their communities from future disasters. Scientists and locals are working together to protect coastal communities from future disasters. By combining the latest scientific findings with the traditional knowledge of local communities, scientists hope to create a more effective early warning system for tsunamis that could save countless lives. So what can you do to help? Well, for starters, subscribe to my channel and join our awesome community of ocean lovers. We're always learning and growing here, and I'd love for you to be a part of it. You can also stay up to date with the latest news by following us on social media. And finally, consider making a donation to one of the organizations we partner with. Your support will help protect our ocean planet for future generations. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. I was in my early 20s when it happened. I was living in Thailand, and it was one of those days that starts off really nice, like a normal day, and then before you know it, everything's gone horribly wrong. It started off pretty normally. It was Sunday morning. I had just gotten back from a week-long trip around the beaches of Thailand with some friends. We were hanging out at this little stand right by the ocean, and the stand owner had a TV, so we were watching some soccer game. And then all of a sudden the power went out. It wasn't an uncommon thing for the power to go out in the small Thai towns where we were staying. So we just kind of sat there, continued watching the soccer game, eating our fruit. And then about 20 minutes later, the power came back on, and we saw on the news that there had been a tsunami warning and we should head up to higher ground. We didn't speak much Thai, but we kind of knew what was going on. The people around us were starting to get very nervous, and they were heading up into the hills. So we thought, okay, let's do that too. So we took our stuff, grabbed a couple bikes, and headed up into the hills. As we got higher and higher, more and more people were coming down from the north part of the island. They were saying there was a big wave, that people were getting washed away. There was a lot of panic. I remember seeing these two older Thai ladies. They were in their 60s or 70s, holding hands running downhill. And it was just this image that really stuck with me. And then we got to the top of the hill, and we could see down onto the ocean. And there was just nothing. Where the ocean had been was now empty land. Just flat, dry sand as far as you could see. And it was strange because I had been there just days before. And there was this kind of rock formation in the ocean, maybe a few miles out. And it had been right there, like clearly visible from where we were standing. And now it was like a mile away. The water had receded so far from shore that it had literally moved this rock formation that was in the water. And I knew something was wrong. It was only a few moments after that the wave hit. It was huge. It was probably 30 feet high. It swept across the island. And I think it killed everyone who was on that beach. By the time the wave passed, the water was up above where we were standing. Within minutes, it had come all the way up the coast, through the town, past where we were, and it just kept going inland. It was unstoppable. When the water receded again, the beach was completely gone. The ocean had taken everything. All the palm trees, all the vendors' stands, the boats that had been pulled up on the shore, everything was gone. But the strangest thing was there was no debris. The ocean had taken everything, but it hadn't left anything behind. There was just this eerie silence. It was as if the ocean had come alive and eaten everything, then walked away, leaving nothing behind. My friend and I didn't have a place to stay anymore. Our bungalow had been destroyed, so we started walking north along the coast looking for some place to stay, hoping to find another bungalow village that had survived. For a while we were walking along the beach, and there were just thousands of dead fish laying there, just kind of washed up on the shore. Then we started passing all of these signs that said danger, do not enter, and we weren't sure why. My friend and I turned round, and we looked back south, and we realized that we were standing on the new shoreline. The ocean had taken everything, and wherever we walked, we were walking on newly formed land. That was the first time I realized how badly this disaster had affected this area. We were standing on land that didn't exist 2 hours earlier. We finally found a place to stay about 4 hours after the tsunami hit. And at that point, people were starting to come out of their hiding places in the hills, trickling back down into the town. They were scared, confused, dazed. People were searching for their family members, asking questions. We spent that night in the market, sleeping in the back of a little store. The next morning, we woke up, and we went outside and we started walking round. People were cleaning up the mess. People were clearing their shops to try to open for business. They were salvaging whatever they could. There was this woman who had this little noodle cart. She had lost her entire house, but she set up her little noodle cart and she started selling noodles to people who were coming by. And that was a common sight after the tsunami. People were trying to pick up the pieces and move forward with their lives. They weren't going to let this defeat them. They were going to keep going. Everyone was just trying to figure out what to do next. The roads were clogged with cars, trucks, people trying to get round. No one knew what had happened to the other highways leading off the island. So everyone was stuck. It felt like 5 days, but it was really only a couple of hours. The road was opened and everyone was trying to get off the island. Everyone was trying to leave. As we got on the ferry, it was full, packed to capacity. There was no room to move. And I remember looking round at all the people on that ferry, everyone clutching their bags and thinking, are they leaving because they don't want to be here? Do they not want to rebuild their lives here? I don't want to leave. This is my home. But most people did leave. They went to Bangkok or other areas in Thailand or they flew home. Within a week, the island was nearly deserted. It was like a ghost town. All the bungalows were destroyed. The businesses were destroyed. The hospital had been destroyed. It was heartbreaking. A few months after the tsunami, I returned to the island. A lot had changed. The beaches had reformed. There were new resorts being built where the old resorts had been destroyed. There were new restaurants, new shops. The island was slowly coming back to life. At the same time, I felt like it would never truly recover from what had happened. When I say that, I don't mean that it would never be as beautiful or as vibrant as it had been before, but that it was irrevocably changed. Something terrible had happened here. There was no denying it. And though the scars were fading, they would never disappear entirely. I'm in my late 30s now. I no longer live in Thailand. I haven't lived there for over 15 years. But sometimes I think about those footprints on the beach. Some survivors migrated to new cities in Thailand or to other countries. Others returned to the rebuilt neighborhoods. Life there has since reformed into something different, bittersweet. Changed and quietly hopeful, if you like this story. You might like the story I did about the 2010 Haiti earthquake. In it, I talk about the aftermath of that disaster and how Haiti has struggled to recover in the years since. You can watch it here. Thank you for listening. It's been a year since the tsunami claimed many lives, including those of 2 young boys. Their parents describe how they kept their children's memory alive. Hi, I'm here today to talk about our experience in the past year without our 2 boys, Alex and Ben. It's hard to believe that it's been a year since that fateful day when the earth shook and the sea went out and then came back. We like to call it the big wave or the wave for short. We were at home and felt the first tremors of the earthquake. And because we live near the beach, we automatically went outside to see if the water had receded, as sometimes it does during an earthquake. And we noticed there was a huge area of the ocean that was missing. And then we started running to higher ground. And by that time, we had no idea that this was going to be the biggest wave that would come crashing into our town. Our oldest, Alex, he was almost 18 and finished high school the week before. He was supposed to start college the next day. Our youngest son, Benjamin, he was 11 years old. He was very much looking forward to starting middle school. We had just celebrated his birthday the day before. They were both playing basketball at the park when the wave hit. Alex was a very good basketball player. He loved the sport. He started playing when he was 9 years old. That was something that he and his brother bonded over. They both played. They were both very passionate about the game. After the wave, we searched for our boys all day and night. There was nothing we could do but wait and hope. When we found them, they had passed away. It was hard to imagine that we would go from celebrating their birthdays, watching them play sports, and talking about their future plans to burying them within days. Our entire family was devastated. Our lives would never be the same. In the aftermath of the tsunami, we saw so much death and destruction, and we couldn't understand why our boys were taken. We have struggled to find meaning in this tragedy. It is difficult for us to talk about what happened that day and in the weeks afterwards. We lost both of our sons, and there are no words to express that kind of pain. But we know that there are other families who have suffered similar losses. Our boys will always be part of our lives. We keep their memory alive by talking about them, sharing stories, looking at photos and videos. We also try to honor their memory by helping others. The tsunami destroyed homes, schools, and businesses. Many people lost everything, including their sense of security and hope for the future. But the community has shown incredible strength and resilience. We've seen this especially in the children. They've faced an unimaginable tragedy, yet they continue to smile and play. They're resilient, just like our boys. Since the tsunami, we've been committed to supporting the children affected by the disaster. It's been heartening to see the progress they've made. The children's strength and optimism give us hope for the future. When we think of our boys, we remember their infectious laughter, their kindness, and their love of life. They were happy, well-adjusted kids who enjoyed spending time with their family and friends. They had a great group of friends. They were always playing sports or video games together. They had each other and their friends to lean on when they were feeling down. They knew they were loved and they knew they were good people. Alex graduated from high school the week before the tsunami. He was planning to study business in college and eventually start his own company. Ben was about to enter middle school. He wanted to try out for the basketball team and make new friends. Both boys loved music. They would listen to it every day and even taught themselves how to play several instruments. They were creative and loved making up songs and playing them for us. Both of our boys were very social. They made friends easily and were always inviting people over to hang out. They were very caring and would lend a helping hand to anyone in need. They were also very adventurous and loved trying new things. They were always up for a challenge and never backed down from a fight. Alex was born in this town. He grew up surfing with his dad and playing basketball with his brother and friends. He loved animals, especially dogs. He rescued a puppy from the streets and named him Lucky. Alex was very close to his grandfather. They would go fishing together every weekend. He was also very close to his mother, who was his best friend. He would tell her everything and she would always be there for him. Benjamin was born in another city. When he was 4 years old, we moved to this town and he started school here. He quickly made friends and was always invited to birthday parties and sleepovers. He loved soccer and swimming, and he was also very close to his family. He would always tell us how much he loved us, and we told him every day how much we loved him too. We miss both of our boys very much. We miss their laughter, their hugs, their smiles, their kindness, their compassion. We miss everything about them. Every day, we think about them and wonder what they would be doing if they were still here. We look at their photos and videos and remember all the fun times we had together. We also pray for them and ask God to watch over them and protect them. The tsunami took away our sons, but it also took away a part of our hearts. We will never forget them, and we will always love them. We will keep their memory alive by helping others and making the world a better place. At the 1-year anniversary of the tsunami, we gathered with other members of our community to remember those who were lost. It was a somber occasion, but it was also a time for healing and moving forward. We released 26 white doves into the sky, one for each person who was lost in the tsunami. The doves soared above us, carrying our hopes and prayers for peace and tranquility. We stood in silence for a moment, remembering our boys and the other victims of the tsunami. We also thanked the emergency personnel and volunteers who had helped us in the aftermath of the disaster. It was a beautiful ceremony and it gave us some closure. As the sun began to set, we lit up 26 candles in memory of the 26 people who were lost. Each candle flame flickered in the darkness, symbolizing the hope that their souls had found peace. We sang songs and read poems in their honor. We shared stories and laughed and cried together. It was a cathartic experience, and it helped us to heal. 1 year after the tsunami, we are still grieving, but we're also hopeful. We know that our boys are in a better place now. They're free from pain and suffering. They're watching over us. We feel their presence in our lives every day, and we know that they're proud of us. We will never forget them, and we will love them forever. As we move forward in our lives, we will continue to honor their memory by helping others and making the world a better place. They would want us to be happy and to help others. So that's what we're going to do. We hope that the story of our boys can inspire others to be kind, compassionate, and helpful. We believe that our boys would want us to help others who are in need. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to help others and make the world a better place. We hope that their story can be a reminder to everyone that life is precious and that we should never take it for granted. We believe that our boys are in a better place now. They're free from pain and suffering. They're watching over us. We feel their presence in our lives every day, and we know that they're proud of us. We will never forget them, and we will love them forever. Thank you for listening to my story. We appreciate your support and understanding during this difficult time. If you would like to help us in our mission to support the children affected by the tsunami, please contact us. Together, we can make a difference.